Let's go to Thomas Park, leading partner of the Deep Tech Venture Fund at the Business Development Bank of Canada. Hi, Thomas. How are you?
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me on.
So this almost sounds too good to be true. Why don't you tell our listeners just how good it is for Montreal when it comes to our tech ecosystem?
I'm a Montreal kid too, and I'm very proud of my city. Though I'm also lucky at BDC where we invest in companies across the country. So the thing is, in Montreal, it's been well known for a number of years that this has been the culmination of a 10-year effort on behalf of our institution, the government, and a number of other actors to really build up a very vibrant tech ecosystem in this city. And we had all the right ingredients. We have world-class research centers at universities like Mila, the well-known AI center. We got really excellent investors that came online in the last 3 years, such as White Star and Innovia. And then we have, we've always had like world-class entrepreneurial talent, and a number of them went into tech. So we saw that with Lightspeed, Hopper, and AppDirect. So, so what we're seeing right now is a culmination effort that's been taking place for a number of years.
Thomas, I've been feeling it. I've been seeing it. Some of the companies you mentioned there, the AI space clearly booming in this city, whether it's, and then there's other spaces, the app world with AppDirect, and you mentioned Lightspeed as well, and everything they're doing to help businesses out. Can you tell our listeners, what are some of the industries, like the broad overview here? I think of artificial intelligence in a big way, but what are some of the other industries where Montreal is really making a name for itself?
Yeah, so in addition to some of the AI, I would say two other sectors. One is in life sciences. So we had Ventus, which is a drug discovery startup. So Montreal is actually very strong in life sciences or in healthcare tech. And I would say the other one is in quantum technology. So what this does, it takes advantage of of how atoms behave at the subatomic level. And Montreal and Quebec is a center of excellence for this kind of stuff. Like Sherbrooke's attracted some of the world's leading researchers. So is Quebec City, and so here are some of the universities here in Montreal. So, and quantum, it's so leading edge. There hasn't been a lot of commercial applications, but we said the same thing about artificial intelligence 5-8 years ago, and look where we're at right now. So I would say those are the two of the other big sectors that are pretty prominent here in the city.
We're with Thomas Park. He's leading partner of the Deep Tech Venture Fund at the BDC, the Business Development Bank of Canada. Now, Thomas, I get that things are booming in Montreal, but then when I hear that we're at the same level when it comes to investments with Toronto, I go, whoa, I've been to Toronto, way more bigger buildings than we have. So can you put that in perspective? What's changed here where we're now back to being competition for Toronto when it comes to dollars?
Yeah, we grew up in the city, so I would say just be careful just how well we do in the regular season doesn't say how well we're going to do in the playoffs. So what I will say is that if you look at the data in the last 10 years, Toronto still has like at least half of all VC investments. So it's still like the 100-pound gorilla in the room in the Canadian tech ecosystem. Though Montreal is catching up, but Toronto is still like the center of gravity here. Toronto and Waterloo, because you want to bring those two ecosystems together. What happened in Montreal in the last 12 to 18 months is the fact that investors doubled down on some of the big tech companies here. Companies like Hopper, companies like Dialogue and Lightspeed that went public. So what happened was that the pandemic accelerated trends that were happening in which investors saw the pandemic, and then they wrote some big checks on some of the big winners here. And that's why in the latest report, it looks like Montreal is just a bit off from Toronto. But in general, Toronto is still a much bigger city in terms of investment, but Montreal is no slouch either.
Okay, good. Well, listen, I'm happy you're putting it in that perspective because it is very important. Thomas, I hate to make things political, and I don't know how political you can get. So you take this question where you want to take it, but it's not lost on me because we've had these companies on the show. By the way, we've had the CEO of AppDirect on the show. Dax Da Silva comes on the program, right? It is not lost on me that for these companies to succeed in the world, they've got to be bilingual. They've got to be able to serve customers in English and in French. We have some new language legislation that is being proposed. It would very seriously try and question how many jobs you can make bilingual. And I want to know if you're worried about if legislation could turn back the clock with the good times we've seen of late.
Tough question. I can't get political at all, just given my role, maybe over drinks off the record one day. Yeah. But I will say this, to be a tech champion, you gotta, your market's not going to come from Canada only. Like the bulk of your revenues ain't going to come from the Canadian or the Quebec market. It's too small here. What you got to go, you got to go to America. You got to go to Asia. You got to go to Europe, right? If you think of BlackBerry, they were talking in more than a couple of dozen languages. I mean, that's what we need to aim for, the BlackBerry, to be that kind of giant tech company and make one here home in Montreal. And we have a few that's on path towards that. It's just that when it comes to the language politics and such, it's like, I'm a Montrealer and I moved back here living in the U.S. because the French language. I just think if you want to be a tech giant, the Canadian market's too small. You're going to have to go overseas anyway.
So would you say that Montreal being multilingual, many people here are trilingual, quadrilingual. You would say that's a positive thing when it comes to this city and its future. The fact that we speak multiple languages here.
That's such a great question. There is no question in my mind the fact that Montreal is a multicultural city, and the fact that our immigration system welcomes people, especially those with the technical background, gives us a huge advantage over other countries. And that's just been well documented, in which metropolises like Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver are just attracting a bunch of talent that are struggling to get into places like in the UK and the US because of more restrictive immigration law. We're big winners, and especially in a city that knows how to welcome immigrants.
We're with Thomas Park, leading partner of the Deep Tech Venture Fund at BDC. Thomas, one last question for you, and it has to go with the size of these companies. When you're investing, when you're seeing big investments made into companies, what are the sizes of these companies? Like, how much of this is startups? Small shops with 25 employees or less, and how much of it is going to the big players?
Great question. I would say in the last 12 to 18 months during the pandemic, much of the checks were going to much bigger players so they could kind of ride out the storm. So if you look at companies like Sonder or Hopper, these are travel companies. Like Hopper is it's a travel app for really targeting millennials and younger folks. And so, but they had a great business model. They need to ride out. So a lot of the recent capital has been skewed towards later stage companies. And that's actually a good sign in the fact that for a long time, Canadians could only write very small checks before foreign funds would come in and start writing bigger checks. And then the startups moved down south to another country. So the fact that we're able to write bigger checks actually shows a more maturing ecosystem.
Thomas, I could talk to you all day on this, but I want to thank you for the moments you've given us today and come back real soon.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Thomas Park is leading partner of the Deep Tech Venture Fund at the BDC.